My name is Tom Fellman. Again, I'm honored and very pleased to be here with you. I will probably start on a rant and a ramble, so somebody shut me off in 2 hours and we'll be all right. I'm the president of Bottom Line Incorporated. I also do situational management, leadership, and change management with our friends back here. Mavendot, if you've heard of them. Had my own company for 30 years. The name of the company is Bottom Line Incorporated. And I specialize basically in leadership training, change management, and coming in at the end of the projects and trying to repair them, if you're familiar with that. My first experience with a project gone awry probably was, well, first I got to start off with a information for you. Do I have any Panther fans here? They just announced that the next home game, the Panthers are selling tickets at the 50-yard line for $50. And for another $25, they'll let you play on the offense. Okay, I'll stop. My first experience with a project gone awry, and my background, I come from originally from Canada, came to the States when I was young. Elmira, New York, went to Grove City College in Pennsylvania, which you probably have never heard of. Master's in Education Administration from the University of North Dakota, which I've never used, and 5 years in the Air Force. But my experience from a leadership standpoint actually started in a dirty old cotton mill, probably 43 years ago, with a company called Milligan. And I was a supervisor on a rotating shift, and literally half the folks that worked for me back then could not read or write. This is in the Deep South way back when. But I will tell you, and I'm very proud to tell you, that I learned more from those folks about leadership and behavior than I have any professor I've ever had before. So what I'm about is about application and not about theory. And I'll probably share several of their stories with you as we go through the hour. My first experience with a project gone awry was when Honda, many years ago, decided to build a lawnmower factory in Burlington, North Carolina. And they dressed everybody up in Honda uniforms, and they were wondering why they had high turnover. At the beginning of each shift, they had everybody stand at attention while they played the Honda anthem. How do you think that went over with the good old boys and girls in Burlington, North Carolina? Not real well. Another incident with Morton Salt down in Avery Island. And they couldn't understand why their ideas and projects were being rejected by the salt miners and the workers. The management came from mostly School of Mining in Utah. The folks that worked in the salt mine were Cajuns. And I went in, and one of the first things I asked them is, what's the trust issue between you and your management? I said, we don't trust nobody come in here wearing no tie. Problem solved. But they never realized that they were mixing and mashing cultures. One of my last experiences was with lean manufacturing in a very large consulting company, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, and I will not be remiss if I don't mention their name, but they're implementing lean manufacturing in this plant. And these are the consultants in the three-piece suits and the fancy ties. And they come in and they got a whole critical path designed for lean manufacturing. That ended up in a union campaign with the Teamsters because they were dealing with a mature workforce that wondered, why the hell do we have to change what we've been doing for 20 years? I'm really good at it. And now you're throwing me back in the mix, and now I got to learn something entirely new, and I'm not going to do it. Imagine the audacity of folks on the firing line saying, I'm not going to do it. So there's a lot of behavior mixed up in the implementation of projects. Would you agree?
Yes.
Absolutely. So what I'd like you to do, if you would turn in your handouts, and the first one that should be on the right side, is behavioral considerations and projects. One of the things that I hear very often, if I had $1 for every time I've heard it, I probably wouldn't be doing this anymore. Management doesn't listen to me. This is very important in the implementation of projects as you pass from the C-suite down to the tip of the spear. Senior management talks in the language of money. Time, cost, value. Right or wrong? Those are their drivers. Those are their behavioral drivers. Folks out on the firing line talk in the language of things. Senior management is strategic, and the folks in their cubby holes and in the workplaces are tactical. They don't know what ROI means. They don't know what EBIT means. I love to go into a plant for the first time, and a lot of people in the personnel office have their mission statement on the wall. You've all seen them, right? The mission statement. You will go out on the floor and you ask people, what's the mission statement? And they say, what the hell is that? They never heard of it. Am I right or wrong? I taught quality circles many, many years ago. Went to the Duran Institute, was certified for TQM. Been through pretty much all of it, all the way through synchronous flow. There are common threads that run through all programs, at least from a quality standpoint. And you know what the folks on the floor are saying? Be patient. This too shall pass. Am I right or wrong? Because you go into the warehouse and it's piled to the ceiling with project 1, project 2, project 3, so on and so forth. And is there any wonder that the workforce often does not trust their management? Many of them don't. Is lack of trust, could that be an issue in project management?
Absolutely.
Is that something that you as a project manager should be aware of as a potential obstacle? And maybe even a question to ask up front. What is the trust level here? So, there's also some other languages at work here, and I've seen this happen a lot. All of us are verbal, or we are visual, or we are experiential. We tend to communicate in the mode or the channel that we are most comfortable communicating with. Senior management certainly does it. How often do we ask the receiver what channel they are most comfortable receiving the information in? I'm visual or I'm verbal. I don't know what I am. I guess I'm visual. No, I'm verbal. I vary from one side or the other. But if I am verbal and you are visual and you like to send out a lot of emails, and I'm looking at 50 emails a day and deleting them because I'm verbal. You got something important to tell me? Call me. Don't send me an email. I might not read it. or I might not understand it, or you may not convey your feelings to me. But management tends to send out messages in the channels that they are used to. For good communication, especially in project management, we need to be sending out messages in all three channels. Does that make sense? We need to have work group meetings. We need to put stuff on the bulletin board. Maybe 25% of them will read it. And we need to allow them to experience it. Because they're at the bottom of the hill does not mean they're the last ones that should experience the project. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So, what kind of behavioral situations have you seen that have gotten in the way of your projects? Once you've given it to the client, once the client has taken over at least tactical control of the project, and you may still be there as an advisor, etc. What kind of behavioral issues have you seen?
Lack of ownership.
Lack of ownership. From who?
Receivers.
From the receivers? Where do you think that comes from?
Transition problems, I guess. Not enough transition work. Training.
Okay, that's part of it.
Management, maybe.
Okay, I agree with you. That's certainly part of it. None of you have experienced any behavioral challenges in implementing projects?
Oh, yeah. I've experienced reputational damage where a project changed hands so many times and became the redheaded stepchild, for lack of a better word. And so by the time we went to implementation, you already had this reputation, and people just kind of, it just was in the rumor mill.
It's already dead in the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then you have to overcome that piece of it.
Yeah. Getting the C-suite to think together, is that a challenge?
Oh, yeah.
Are there behavioral issues there?
Yes.
What drives C-suite behavior?
Typically what's in it for them, because most of them are managing their career and their next position at the C-level.
Right.
It's all about them. Ego.
Ego, power, politics? Lots of politics. How do you bring the C-suite together?
One of the ways is to show them the benefit of them cooperating together in order to make this project successful, because it's going to fall back to them at the end. If it's successful, they're going to get the credit for it, and it's going to benefit them over.
Will they get the credit for it?
Well, of course they will, because they're the ones that initiated it. It doesn't matter that the project manager brought it through, they're going to take the credit for the success.
Finance. Operations. We can throw HR in here. And you probably got several other silos.
Well, if they're an organization that's using a balanced scorecard management system, then all of those silos affect them, and they're being managed, they're being evaluated on how well they are managing the interaction between silos.
Balanced scorecard, I haven't heard that term in a long time. I implemented it with Arizona Game and Fish quite a few years ago. How many of you have heard of balanced scorecard? Fairly common? Is it still used a lot?
CHS still has one.
Okay,
I don't know how much they manage by it, but
right. Yeah, the problem, in government? Okay. Yeah, if you're not using balanced scorecard, the problem is most reward systems are based on how well your silo is working. And you can have a project that improves one silo, but conceivably screws up the silos around it. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
So you got to get a core process and figure out how the project works into the core process to benefit everybody. Now let's talk a minute about behavior, and I'd like you to make a note of this. Not much of what I say will be important enough to make a note of, but I think this one is. And it's pretty simple. It applies to everybody but teenagers. A truism. Everything that hits you right smack between the eyes, everything that comes out of someone's mouth or goes down on paper pretty much, the first thing to always hit you from a behavioral standpoint will always be a symptom. Behavior is caused, all behavior is caused by something. It is a symptom. Behavior comes from only one of two sources. There is an antecedent, something that happens before the behavior to cause it. Antecedent. Or we know what the consequence is, but we have to do the behavior to get the consequence. Does that make sense? All behavior comes from it. Your name, sir?
Chris.
Chris. Chris, you want me to work over this weekend? I ain't going to do it. I'm not going to do it. My kid's playing Little League Baseball this weekend. I'm not going to do it. You got no right to tell me that I'm going to work this weekend. Understood? Could you run into an employee like this?
Oh, yeah.
I'm normally a nice guy. This is unexpected behavior from me. But you pushed my button because I've got a consequence that means more to me than the overtime. And that's my kid playing Little League ball. So you will only control behavior to whatever degree you have over the span of control. Over either the antecedent or the consequence. If you cannot control the antecedent or the consequence, you will not control the behavior. Then it's time to fish or cut bait. Another question. Well, step 2, the grieving cycle. That's interesting. I'll do it over here. I had a weaver once. It's going way back. Never been in a dirty old cotton mill. We had a weave room. We had about 300 looms, big old looms, draper looms in the weave room. And you had a big warp on the front of the loom. You had 1,000 threads or more that were threaded through what they called heddles. And they were hooked on harnesses, and you would have 5 to 12 harnesses with all these heddles in back of it, depending upon the weave. Some heddles would go up, others would go down. You'd have a steel-tipped shuttle flying from... Are you a lint head?
No, but I just.
You know about cotton mills?
Yes.
Okay. They called us lint heads back in the day. That's before OSHA. We had blow-off stations every 3 poles. So We're putting them in brand new water jet looms. Big project, lots of money involved. These are quiet. They were very efficient. They're redoing the floors and redoing the lights. Our weavers could actually make more money on these looms. We, the management team, were so excited for our weavers. Nice, clean environment, safe environment, gonna make more money. What more could you ask for? Our weavers gonna be so excited about what we're doing for them. One of the folks that taught me a very valuable lesson, I'll never forget her. Her name was Bertha Mabry. She'd been on the same set of looms for 22 years. Same set of looms. She was our best weaver. Couldn't wait to tell Bertha about she's going to go to the other end of the weave room, nice clean environment, make more money. Yay, Bertha. We're happy for you. She broke down and cried. Now, why in the world do you think she was crying for joy? Do people resist change?
Yes.
It's your first test. Is resistance to change a symptom or a cause? It's a symptom. Why do you think she was resisting? Going to the unknown. That was part of it. What else?
New pressures?
New pressures.
She was a leader and now she's gonna be equalized with everybody else.
That was the big one. She was the subject matter expert on those looms. Her reputation came from how well she ran those looms. The entire workforce respected her for her expertise. Do you think when we were putting this whole plan together, we ever considered Bertha in the plan? No. That's behavioral bullcrap. They'll do what we tell them to do. Well, guess what? If Bertha is a natural leader, not a formal leader, but a natural leader, could she influence the direction of the implementation one way or the other?
Yes.
I guarantee it. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. So these are all considerations, I believe, that should be addressed and questions asked at the beginning, the birth of the project, not towards the end, not when you stumble across it. Should you know whether the organization has a union or not? It's a big one. Experience, why?
Because the union doesn't move in the same speed that you would like, and they see things from a totally different perspective, and what you might think is a benefit, they'll see as a hindrance, because especially with automation, that means fewer workers in the future, so they're very resistant to that type of change.
Because it's fewer dues.
Right.
They're influential in making you successful.
Yes,
They motivate people.
that's right. Unfortunately, and those stewards often are those natural leaders that, how do we get rid of the natural leaders? We promote stewards into management. Seen that happen. Yeah, they could be moving light speed in totally opposite direction. So it's important to know what you're getting into in terms of, are any of your organizations or companies unionized? Is trust important? How do you find that out?
You ask questions. You also look at how people respond, the responsiveness, meaning if someone gets up and speaks on something, how does the culture respond to that person?
Right, yeah. Trust is very important. Naturally, most folks in the workforce, even through mid-level management, don't trust upper management. But we got another dynamic at work here, and it's called generations. And there's leeway about 4 or 5 years between any of there's not a specific cutoff point. 46, before 46, matures. Somewhere around 48 to 64 to 68, baby boomers. '64, '68 to about '87, thereabouts. We got the Gen Xers. '87 to present. We got the millennials. And there's a new one just entering the workforce. We haven't got a good name for them yet. They're called the next generation or the Y generation. What are matures looking for out of their work? What are their drivers?
Trying to get to retirement.
Trying to get to retirement.
Stability.
They've already retired on the job. Officially, they only got 2 more years to go. Yeah. What are they looking for from management and from their coworkers? Loyalty. You know the big driver for these folks? Team. Trust. They like to belong to teams. They're heroes, people from World War II, the military. When I first went into the cotton mills, we had basketball leagues, industrial basketball leagues. We had industrial softball teams. We had industrial bowling leagues. And it was wonderful. You associated with people you worked with outside of work. Am I ringing any bells here? It makes sense? What are baby boomers looking for?
Appreciation?
Appreciation and respect. Starts to get a little more dicey now. Don't mean to insult anybody. And these are general characteristics. There are obviously notable exceptions in all these generations. Gen Xers, what are their drivers?
Financial gain.
Cash.
Stability.
One thing they and the millennials have in common is they're working simply to support their lifestyle. So you're 23 years old. What are your long-term goals? I think next weekend I'll go out and get a pizza. What? That's your long-term goal? It's short-term. Who's looking for instant gratification? Which group? Millennials.
But they grew up in a world of everything's instant. They don't know any different.
Yeah, because the matures and baby boomers gave them everything.
Well,
Technology gave them a lot.
Technology.
Technology.
well, that brings us to a very important point, because a lot of projects now contain new and fancier technology. Who eats that stuff up? The millennials, the Gen Xers. I'm a baby boomer. What the hell's wrong with the way I've been doing it for the last 20 years? Uh-oh. We have a separation here. Now, let's say that you're using a baby boomer to train a millennial. Now, part of what I do is train people. Your biggest challenge from a leadership standpoint often is to deal with politically incorrect people. Am I right or wrong? So I may use a little bit politically incorrect language to make a point here. May I? Yeah. It won't get too bad. I know better words than one. Your name?
Marion.
Would you play?
Oh, tell me the game first.
Okay.
Smart person.
So he got married the first time. I digress. You have a young millennial. I've been training for 12 years. You have a young millennial that's come to you and complained to you that I'm not a good trainer, that I don't answer his or her questions. I just boss them and tell them how to do it, and they're not learning anything, and their probationary period is pretty close to being up, which means we could let them go at that point, and they're concerned. This millennial's concerned. I'm not immature, I'm a baby boomer, in case you're confused.
Okay, I'm not offended.
Okay. I can see we're off to a rough start already. So you decide to talk to me. I'm your trainer. What are you going to tell me?
So you're the trainer and the millennial came to me,
Yes.
okay? I would say, how's the training going with Jeffrey? How's that training going?
We need to check the villages around here because one of them's missing their idiot. I don't know what his problem is. Maybe he's not getting enough oxygen. I don't know. But when you stand close to him, you can hear the ocean. He's got stupid. I keep telling him what to do, and he keeps asking questions. Just do it the hell I told you to do it.
Can you give me an example of a question that he has?
He said, well, that's not what I learned in school, how to do it.
Where did he go to school?
UNCC.
What was his major?
I don't know, rock collecting? I don't know.
Well, what
I know he likes me. Sometimes I see his tail wagging.
I understand. And does he by chance get on his phone while he was working?
Yeah.
Okay, what's he doing on his phone?
I don't know. I can't understand half what he's talking about.
Is he by chance responding to you after he's been on his phone? Is he talking to you and questioning your source information after he's been on his phone?
I'm there to teach him. I'm not there to answer his questions.
Well, there's you know how these kids are. They like to be on their phones.
Some of them are alive only because it's against the law to kill them.
Well, the only thing that I can suggest to you, and it may not be a great training fit for you, we may need to look at that, but I think you need to look at
I've been training people here for 12 years. I know how to train.
That's not very long, you know that, okay? That's not very, okay.
You're not a good playmate.
The only thing I can tell you is that everyone brings value to the table. You bring value and Jeffrey brings value. And I really like what you bring to the table. And I would propose to you that you ask Jeffrey what Jeffrey's doing on the phone, because sometimes they're looking up what you just said and they want to validate it. Now, it's not going to be something that's your cup of tea. I know it's not. But I think we need to sit down and look at this and see what some options are. Are you replicating the performance context?
Time out. You're doing a wonderful job. Give her. Excellent. Not your first rodeo, right?
Oh, one or two, maybe.
you will have clients that have no idea how to do what she just did. Am I right or wrong? That's about as good as you're going to see it. It's about as good as you're going to see it. And there's some other tricks like role reversal and stuff you can use to get their attention, but that's pretty doggone good. But the tip of the spear, it can look good on paper. But once you lay it on the people, that's where the problems come in, especially when you're dealing with more than 2 layers. So,
But it seems like some of the, and I don't want to get you off track, because I know we got, a lot of time left, but, sometimes, I know the folks are just coming into the workforce and they don't have that, either the work ethic or the wherewithal or the self-confidence or whatever, but, a lot of time, work is a combat sport most of the time. And if these folks can't rise to the occasion pretty quickly, they're gonna end up being a liability, not an asset.
would agree.
I mean, and one of my folks, he told, I almost gave him a nervous breakdown, but, and I guess there was some of that communication situation, but it certainly wasn't on purpose, but I said, look, work matters, your work product matters. And if there are mistakes in there, there's consequences for that.
Right?
I mean, that's just the way it is.
Were you in the military? Just a lucky guess. Come on.
Just a comment on that, they really don't care because they're just supporting their lifestyle. And so
Right.
when you point out an error, I've had this for the last 2 months with, I fall in the baby boomer and I'm working with millennials. They don't really care because they'll just
Go across the
along with
street.
They'll go across the street. That's the mentality.
Right.
And the understanding that your work gets potentially presented all the way up the chain, and some of the stuff I'm doing goes to board of directors, and I said, do you understand that? They're like, the reference that something they do goes to the board of directors, they don't really care, authority isn't there.
No.
So, and I don't know if we have a PMI person in here, but I looked around and we don't have in this organization today many in the millennials, and I was curious what PMI is doing because all of us seem to be more experienced. Everywhere I look around, I don't see too many millennials here at the PMI organization today.
Maybe they're doing the virtual.
They could be doing virtual. I was just curious
There you go.
for our PMI or group.
Virtual? What the hell is that?
My son asked me, why are you going down there if they're doing it online?
Yeah.
Experiential.
The human experience is
Food,
very
they got
lacking.
Attaboy, yeah.
food, I mean,
So anyway, just food for thought. I
No.
noticed that when you brought that up.
Yes. Yeah. Ma'am?
Just doing a lot of reading, so the other shift of that, right, is a lot of companies are researching now to figure out how to tap the millennials, because that's the future of the workforce,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
They're gonna have to figure out how to shift the paradigm if they're gonna be able to tap into that
Yes.
future talent, right?
One of the things also that millennials have, the concept that they're smarter than us because they've done more education-wise, and they don't understand the difference between book knowledge and experience. And a lot of times, like my son in our debates, I'll say, yeah, on paper this looks good, but in real life application, this is my experience and this is what's happened. And they can't conceive that piece of it because they haven't experienced it. So they're really smart with book smart, but they don't have the experience and the common sense behind it.
but isn't that exactly how we were when we
Never,
came out?
no, never.
I'm sorry, I was the most brilliant 22-year-old on the planet.
Yeah,
We were
it's
the
true.
same way. We expected more when we got out of college than what we had to get, you know.
True, true.
And why are these old folks hanging around in this company when they can go off and retire and let the smart people take over?
That's how we got promotions back in the day. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something real quick to what you had brought up about what is PMI doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they are exploring ways too, but
you have people that are kind of acting as project managers in your department, even though they're not formally designated as that? And I've actually been able to get the names of some people, some millennials, who are earlier in their career but are kind of exploring the opportunity to move into that position or tasked with it. And I'm reaching out and trying to mentor some of those people. And so far it's been going really well. So I think PMI needs our help as well, you know, one-on-one to try to bridge that gap, to try to learn from them, because I've learned a lot from them about how you can use technology to make things more seamless, and especially working overseas with overseas teams, the collaboration available in SharePoint and those sorts of things. But you know, I think that's something we should challenge ourselves with wherever we can to be the boots on the ground to help get those people interested in what we do.
That's really good advice, I think. Yes.
Those are also, can I add to that? The principles of Scrum and Agile in itself is evolving away from the old-fashioned waterfall way, which is very staunchy and very process-oriented and full of documentation and all the things that we were accustomed to. And the millennials don't want part of.
Right.
I included.
Well, companies don't want that either because they want it quicker, better,
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Iterative.
but they're also cutting some corners at times too and causing problems on the back end too. So I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be a collaboration.
Correct.
And they have to find a good transition, because I personally am having trouble with some of my Scrum teams and some of my, you know, non-Scrum teams, and it's really a juggling act. And I'm telling you right now, I for certain applications, for certain things, I like Agile. For other things, I don't. So it's like,
Well, I tend to see it in websites and apps. How many have outright errors in them? Of links that don't work, things that don't respond. Even sometimes you don't get to a subtotal screen. And it's fine if it's like Facebook or something fluffy, but if you're like in the healthcare realm and something is not system tested properly, people can die.
That's right.
And it's really hard and scary, because if you see all these software things not working in one context where there is no consequence, then you think, well, what's happening with my bank accounts when I'm in the hospital? Are my lab results being transferred properly for
Right.
the doctor to read them? I mean, I think it's very scary for what I see.
And a lot of that going on right now
Yeah.
with the,
So, to kind of circle back around to some of the behavioral things that you were initially talking to us about. And
Yes.
we broke down the generations. I work for a small company, and we literally have one person in each of these realms. And one of the challenges has been that you have a mature, you have baby boomer, you have 1 or 2 Gen X's, and you have 2 or 3 millennials. And the challenge that we've had to work to overcome, and I as a project manager have to work with all of them in the various ways that they exchange information. And getting them to work together, when I was initially there, it was like, this is my project, I do my thing and do it on my project. And so a collaborative effort was like, what do you mean? How do I don't understand that I do not compute. And it is very interesting to see a baby boomer and a millennial work on the same project together. They do not speak the same language.
Right.
And there is a lot of this initially. But I think that what you said about communication being key and making sure that you're continuously finding what they can pull from one another has changed that paradigm. And I think that there are baby boomers who look at a millennial and go, you're trying to take my job.
right.
There are millennials who are like, oh dear God, you do this the slowest way I've ever seen done. And to have that balance, to be able to see, I see where you're going, and you're right, you can do this part faster. I'm not trying to learn it, I don't wanna learn it. And let them do that, but then there is the millennial that says, there's this whole series of documentation and detail you're asking for that just, I don't
Not necessary.
do that well. And them being able to see together that in a collaborative effort, there are benefits to both versus my way or your way.
Right.
Has helped it shift from this person is responsible and we're doing it this way, to this is how our team interacts, which portion of the team do you
Yes, but that doesn't necessarily very often happen naturally.
It does.
It calls for intervention and coaching and rules of engagement set up with both sides. How many organizations do that? Or how many just throw it out the window and say good luck? One of the things that I found interesting, it came up, we were talking about accountability. And I'm not going to get too far into this. Another area that I do a lot of work in is in the area of emotional intelligence. And I'm talking language that you folks already know. But right brain, left brain. And left brain is oriented much more towards task. Right, wrong, black, white, binary thinking. Precision. Those types of things. Structure. The right side of the brain is more behavioral based. A good organization has to work in balance. Most technical organizations, do they lean to the left or the right? They lean to the left. Their C-suite leans to the left. They were really good technically, and all of a sudden they find themselves managing a whole group of technically oriented people. Would these people tend to shy away from confrontation in holding people accountable? Yeah, other than just say, do it or you're fired, that's the only language they know. Other than that, confrontation is difficult. And very often people confuse confrontation with conflict. When you think about it, confrontation is often needed to avoid conflict. It's not all one and the same. But very few managers, mid-level managers and leaders have been taught anything about how to initiate confrontation or how to even properly coach. So this emotional intelligence plays a part too in terms of looking at which way your client is leaning and what may they be lacking on the right side to give them balance going through a project. As a point, I've developed a little schematic, if you will. Should be in your handouts. It's titled Stages of Change in Key Activities. And this is my attempt to put balance in a project. I will be the first to admit to you, no doubt it's a feeble effort in your eyes, but it was my stab at it anyway. You have stages, and I'm thinking in terms of 3 stages: preparation, implementation, and consolidation. That's the left side. That's the critical path side. But where you have going across from left to right is the behavioral side. Who do we need to communicate with? How do we need to prepare our people for this? So let me just give you a couple of minutes to look at it and see if you have any questions, and if it makes sense to you. It's a tool that I've found many people have used over the years. And this is yours. You can make whatever changes you want to with it. Does this make sense? It's a stab at keeping that balance in terms of communicating, people bringing people in early instead of just throwing it on them, getting them involved, who needs to be involved, when, etc. I hope you would find it useful. I got to end up with one more joke. I'm only allowed to tell two jokes a day, so this is my second one. A young man brings his son to his grandmother for a visit. Loves his grandmother dearly. She meets him on the front porch. She hugs her grandson, gives him a kiss on the cheek. They go into the parlor for a nice chat. And the friend follows them into the parlor. And they're sitting there chatting, and the friend really doesn't have a whole lot to add, but there is a big bowl of peanuts on the table. So the friend starts eating the peanuts. And the chat ends. The peanuts are all gone. And they're saying goodbye to each other on the porch. And the young man's friend says to the grandma, "Thank you, ma'am, for leaving those peanuts out. I really enjoyed them." She said, "Oh, I'm so glad you did. I lost my dentures 2 weeks ago. All I could do was suck the chocolate off of them."